impressive moment captured over there in East Java. What we're seeing here is not ordinary water. This is lava flowing down the slopes of Mount Semeru, this volcano that has been showing activity. Well, just imagine this must be burning hot. The situation with the fast-moving lava coming from Mount Semeru would have been formed by volcanic debris, along with mud, hot material, and also some water. Well, a little bit of everything. This volcanic flow has been attracting attention. Obviously, it caused impacts on fishing in the area, and also in this region, which, by the way, several communities have already been evacuated precisely because of this situation. You can also see the Canadian Prime Minister and President Trump there, but he doesn't show up. Claudio Sheinbaum would be here. The president's seat is empty. She didn't come to the event. Well, we'll see later why she didn't come, but obviously this situation draws attention. We'll see what happens. She had been invited to the 2026 World Cup draw. This was also confirmed by the presidency itself. At this moment, it's not exactly clear what happened. We'll see if more information comes out later. From the presidency, not right now. What happened? Let's see. A huge sandstorm is being reported. This is in Australia, by the way, at a gold mine. An impressive storm, a kind of tsunami, but of dust and sand. This happened in a very remote place in Australia where they have this gold mine. Honestly, the size of this storm is surprising. Let's get to the information. How have you been? How are you doing? Thank you for joining us. Hey, let's get to the details. Let's go to the... How have you been? How have you been joining us? Let's go into details. Donald Trump issues this fierce, harsh warning to a document, by the way, a strategic one. It's not something that has been said publicly, but rather a document that has just now come to light, in which Donald Trump accuses the European Union and migration of causing a civilizational destruction in Europe, according to the new United States National Security Strategy. The official document states that migration policies, political censorship, destructive actions, and the weakening of national entities will lead to continental decline in the next 20 years. The text shows a strong ideological alignment with European far-right parties, aligned with these recent movements to promote the patriotic revival of the continent. A topic, a movement then, that strongly favors that kind of far-right groups or parties. Obviously, it's a topic where we increasingly see Trump wanting to invest and influence globally toward these kinds of groups. The statement is obviously shaking things up over in Europe, and it's deepening the rift between Washington and the European Union. There's an ever-growing separation between European leadership and North American leadership. It's an issue that's becoming more and more evident, and it's something we need to pay attention to in order to see what consequences might come in the future. Changing the subject, there's something else. Do you remember this little monkey we're looking at here? We don't have a picture of this monkey, but it's the monkey that would have survived this escape from a laboratory, a truck full of monkeys that they used to, well, infect them with certain diseases. And then after these infections, well, they look for cures and all that. Well, this little monkey, some say they were infected, others say they weren't infected. Well, who knows? But the truck crashes, all the monkeys escape, and they hunt them down one by one. But one of them survives and is alive. Yes, it's alive, and now it's in a home, right? According to reports, this little monkey, the one that escaped from the highway accident in Mississippi, was identified as Forrest, and he found a new home in a wildlife shelter called Popcorn Park Animal Refuge in New Jersey. This, according to what the Americans themselves are reporting, says that the survivor managed to escape but has already been recovered. He has already been taken to a place where he will spend his days and he will no longer be experimented on. 5 other monkeys lost their lives since the capture operation was basically about hunting them down. There was no intention to catch them alive. In this case, with the last monkey, they did manage to capture it alive, and so they have taken him to this laboratory. Well, I mean this shelter. No more laboratories for this little monkey. There's also an update since we hadn't heard about this monkey for weeks. Now it's been reported. What happened with that case? Another thing that also draws attention is that a little while ago we were talking with Jerez about a huge move he's making. China has been deploying 100 warships all over South Asia, right? That's what it is. The southern area is filling with these ships, attracting attention. Taiwan and Japan have expressed concern about the Chinese military movements, saying that this Chinese activity is out of place. Is something wrong? Their unprecedented movement, and both Taiwan and Japan have expressed their dissatisfaction with such a massive movement. This is reported by Zhongguo, that they were deploying a large number of naval and coast guard ships in East and South Asian waters. According to what will be more than 100 ships of this type, as reported by the intelligence reports from Riben and from Taiwan itself, the activity is not limited to the Taiwan Strait, but has been, let's say, growing, extending, let's say, toward this area. Let's take a quick look. This would be the Taiwan Strait, this area we're seeing here, this piece. But this has been extending toward the South China Sea. It has been extending toward what is the Yellow Sea, yes, and to the East Sea of Japan, toward this area. This area no longer borders China, as Russia is on one side and North Korea on the other. But anyway, they've been seen deploying throughout this whole area with these 100 ships, which, mind you, hey, that's quite something. They're going to carry out a military exercise that's already scheduled. It's nothing unusual, but the point is that there isn't any exercise scheduled by China at this moment. And that has also thrown people off, right? What's going on? What's the reason for this movement? The questions don't end there. Let's discuss another situation, as some unidentified flying objects have appeared in Florida and California. Let's go with that. In the background, as you could see and as you will see over the next few seconds, lights and objects have been appearing. This is in Florida. Objects started appearing on November 12th in different places, objects that were emitting pulses of light in the background. For example, they appear again and then disappear. It's as if they're communicating with each other in a rather curious way. But it's not just this case in Florida that draws attention. No, there's a third one. I think a fourth one is about to show up over here. But anyway, several of these objects have been appearing on the Florida coast, but they've also shown up in California. This is a camera, they call it a surf cam, and these objects, these lights, appeared as if they were projecting something around them, right? A topic that caught people's attention and has clearly sparked speculation. What was floating in the sky over California and Florida? The incident in Florida actually happened in Ventura, California. There's another camera there that captures the light as if they were searching for something, a beam of light that obviously caught people's attention, this beam of light. Passing almost in front of the camera, you can see, look, there's the coast, and it's as if they were searching for something on the beach. Yes, this happened at 4:46 a.m., causing a big stir on social media and in the news. The phenomenon shows several floating structures that multiplied in the night sky and then reappeared. Sometimes alone, sometimes with others. It happened several times. It shows an intense beam of light coming down from above, let's say, similar to the classic abduction scenes, you know, the ones they always show in movies. Well, just imagine, that's how it appeared. What happened? What is this situation about? The thing in Florida seems to be something different. They don't seem like different cases on different days, but in the end, well, this is obviously interesting in surf. In surf flight is what it's called. The website is where they've been publishing these images, not where they're shown. Well, in the last 24 hours, people have been talking about the topic, and the Florida case has been discussed since that day. Recently, though, they were recorded since the 12th. These lights are only now being revealed. According to what Surf says, his team saw that several cameras had captured something surprising. They don't know what it is, right? So they're just asking if anyone else recorded these objects, right? The recordings in this context have attracted attention, especially in recent years, right? On the coast, both east and west, they've been capturing images of UAVs or unidentified flying objects, which in many cases can obviously be drones, which in many cases they can be. Who knows what other phenomena, or even, well, the classic UFOs or UAVs really. Strange anomalies there, unidentified aerial phenomena as they call them now with the famous UAVs, unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified flying objects. Or whatever we want to call them, they keep appearing in different places, but people don't talk about them as much anymore. There was a media boom, but then the media abruptly stopped covering the topic. But this doesn't mean that this situation stops happening. And well, here, at least here, we'll be talking about it when these kinds of events happen. And well, beyond knowing what they are, it's interesting at least to observe them, right? And try to understand how it works, right? What happens to them? When do they appear? And which beaches do they frequent? I think those details are important. This is November 12th, right? This thing that showed up over there in Florida, and that has also, well, caught people's attention these last few hours. The first post, even though it happened on the 12th, the first post was made on November 18th. And well, it started to spread because different people were recording these pulses, these objects. Off the coast of Florida, this is in Ponte Vedra Beach, right? Because Florida is very big, isn't it? So we also have to specify this is in Ponte Vedra Beach, the beach where these strange lights are being seen. We're not going to say, well, let's move on to other important matters as well. Well, we have to draw attention to what's happening regarding these images that have been shown of the leaders of Japas. Basically, they're trying to agree on the next move or moves that this radical group is going to make. And this really stands out because from here, the possibility of whether there will be peace or not in that region of the world between Israel and Gaza is defined. Basically, no, this group continues to operate in the area, never stopping. They say they're boosting security due to fears of Israeli attacks. At the same time, they're asking them to lay down their arms so the area can calm down. Hamas is implementing new guidelines, even technological ones, due to the growing fear of a new attempt. Selective attack by Israel, according to the report by Shaka Ladwat, cited by the Jerusalem Post. After the elimination of Hezbollah's high-ranking commander Haitham Ali Tatavavi in November, the leaders of this radical group now believe they could be next. The new measures include, for example, that they no longer use cell phones or electronic devices. And, well, they are holding meetings basically in facilities where no kind of devices can be brought in. I mean, basically like a bunker and things like that. Despite guarantees from the United States and the mediators, Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt, to the leaders, the situation remained unchanged. Hamas, but obviously, well, those haven't been possible because Israel has been operating to eliminate these leaders. So, well, the situation doesn't end, does it? Even though there's little talk about what's happening in this region of the world, things are still the same as before. We were talking about it there with Gires now, another issue that also draws attention within these struggles that are happening. There's also, well, an important meeting today between leaders, which is the one between Modi and Vladimir Putin. Putin arrived in India yesterday, but today is the meeting, and there are some points that I think are interesting to consider. We have to remember that, to begin with, India recently stopped buying oil from Russia, reducing its oil purchases by 50%. It's not completely, but the relationship between Putin and Modi is becoming clearer and clearer. According to reports, New Delhi and Russia have strengthened their ties and signed 15 key agreements. What do you think they're about? Well, energy and what else? Defense and what else? Economic cooperation. The complete opposite of what Donald Trump and, in any case, Europe wanted. This is Putin's first official visit to India since the start of the war in Ukraine. And even though he has been critical of the war and has even sent some aid to Ukraine, he still continues to do business with Russia. Both leaders held a formal meeting, first behind closed doors, before the annual India-Russia summit, where, by the way, a joint statement and even a strategic plan are expected. They will present a strategic plan through 2030, and that too, of course, will obviously be closely watched by Donald Trump. Which, well, on one hand, things were going well with Modi, or more or less well, and also on the other hand, he has a strange relationship with Vladimir Putin, right? Well, that's how things are. We'll see what they say in that joint statement, which isn't public yet, but once it is, we'll be commenting on it here. Notice that yesterday we showed you this image from the Hubble. Well, actually, they were taken on November 30th. This is one of the images, but what's interesting today is the analysis that Avilo EV himself does of the images. What does an astrophysicist see then with a mind like Avilo EV's? And that obviously has drawn attention according to what Loeb himself observes. Well, these images, because of the characteristics of the lens, because of the characteristics of the information available, for example, about where these halos are seen. All these kinds of things, well, are information that gives them important data. The Hubble telescope captured new images on November 30th of the interstellar object 13 Atras, after its closest approach to the Sun. The images reveal a structure that confirms that anomaly in the shape of a teardrop, with the antitail pointing toward the Sun. Defying what is considered standard cometary morphology, it does. The study that they are conducting simultaneously has generated, on the other hand, what he calls a kind of halo. No, this thing around it, which is huge, which is gigantic. And he claims that given the solar winds, this shouldn't exist, it shouldn't be there. He argues that the visual phenomenon observed should be due to some unknown phenomenon, and even suggests again the idea of swarms of macroscopic, non-volatile objects. Why does he say this? The fact that this halo doesn't disappear? At the moment of passing through there, you say something that is simply, up until now, inexplicable. At least for now it is. Also within this topic, he says that he is concerned that in recent days a series of data and images have been appearing that are made with artificial intelligence, and he asked to be careful with these images. They have even used his own voice to make him say things that, well, that aren't true, right? So, also to be careful about what has been mixed in between half-truths of what he says and with other things that appear, he says. The nemesis of science is the easy content created by artificial intelligence. To thrive, our civilization must distinguish between facts and technological hallucinations, Milwem warns today in a publication. Well, by criticizing these images and the fact that they've made it easier for many people to, well, commit fraud, right? On these topics as serious as, well, like the Comet 1303 thing, well, that's all he says. Basically, to keep our civilization standing, we have to learn to distinguish these artificial intelligence created realities from actual reality, let's say, right? Well, part of what he's saying is true, and well, there still aren't many details yet. For example, regarding the speed, the latest data reported by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory does, yes, it does confirm the speed. By the way, we still have that pending, whether it confirms there's a deceleration or not, as it was mentioned that it could be one. Yes, and let's say if it's heading towards Jupiter, I mean, if it's changing course towards Jupiter, that's also something that's been confirmed. Yes, it has decreased. The speed dropped from 245,000 to 220,000 kilometers per hour. It was at 210,000 sped up to 245,000 and is now at 220,000 or 222,000 kilometers per hour. And well, that's also something that's interesting. If there's another deceleration, not as big as you might think, this is really strange. The fact that there's just a deceleration is really strange. Still, it's extremely fast. The comet is very, very fast. Still, to be able to stop at Jupiter or do something like that, wouldn't it have to decelerate a lot more to do that? If it's going to pass closer to Jupiter than expected, it'll be practically where the Hill sphere is, which is where it absorbs the most gravity from Jupiter. It seems then as if it wants to take advantage of that gravity to change its course there, but obviously we don't really know that until we see it closer, and that's not until March. And another very interesting fact that I mentioned to you yesterday is about the Lewis probe, which is one of the ones that took a picture recently. It's a probe that's heading to Jupiter. It's going really fast to Jupiter, and it will arrive in 2031. And the comet passed by and overtook the probe like it was nothing. And now we're sending the probe to arrive in 2031, but the comet will arrive on March 16th, 2026. So, several years later, the human probe arrives, which is one of the most advanced we have. That's how slow it is. Compared to the comet, you realize just how impressive the speed of this comet is. But well, that's part of what's happening, right? If humans have the ability to reach a higher speed than this Lewis, no, but not this one. As much as the comets, I think it's 25% of the speed of light, right? At that speed, it's going at about 25%. They estimate it based on the speed of light, which is impressive. The speed isn't like that. It's actually, well, it's the fastest object of this kind they've had so far. Now, let's go. Well, also to another image, right? This image from what year? Is it from last year? But I found it very interesting because an image of this drone was circulating in several places, and this image, at least, I hadn't seen before. I hadn't seen this type of drone or object before, which is very curious, and I want to show it. Because they said when they saw it, they thought it was a plane. Yes, they thought this was a plane going slowly from a very high altitude, and that's why it looked like that. But if you get closer, let's see if we can see it there. Look, just look, this is clearly not a plane. Check out the structures. From far away and through fog, it looks like a plane. But up close, I can't tell what it is, though it isn't a plane. I mean, or it's not a known plane. It could be some kind of prototype plane or something like that too, right? But the shape is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's a really strange structure, right? Honestly, let's see how all the movement looks. Let's listen. Now it's paused and there it is. I'm not sure if it has a propeller or propulsion, but it's moving very slowly. .40 at least, it's going really slowly, right? But if you notice, it does have one. I mean, you can see that it has a kind of tail that goes very far forward, right? Unlike airplanes where the tail is all the way at the back. It has this part that's very, very, very thin, this really thin part, and then the wings are shaped in a certain way. Strange, isn't it? It doesn't look like a normal airplane to me, and it's moving really slowly, right? Funny thing, this was photographed, it was recorded in 2024, but it adds to the list of drones that have been seen. No, I insist, we've seen that shape here before. I even photographed it and sometimes play a loop of it. The next one has also already been photographed from the side. It's not that big. I mean, this object, who knows what kind of drone it is, but it's super interesting, right? Well, let's move on to other topics. Let's go to other important matters as well. Donald Trump is breaking the consensus, and there is a clash with NATO and pressure on Europe regarding defense. Well, from this alliance, suppose the United States is making a demand that exceeds previous ones. We have to remember that NATO, the NATO allies who account for the majority of non-nuclear defense capabilities, not before 2027 have certain commitments that would now be increasing. President Donald Trump distanced himself from Europe by criticizing what he called unrealistic expectations about the war in Ukraine. And he announced a strategy to, he says, create a different expectation. He's talking about the President of the United States, right? The warning, he says, is clear. If Europe doesn't meet the deadline, he could reduce his involvement in continental defense, which obviously creates uncertainty given what's happening. So basically what he's saying is, I'm not going to help you defend yourselves anymore, or at least not as much. If something happens to you, well, you're on your own, basically, right? Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin is already strengthening ties with India. No, apparently an approach with Trump through Kushner, no, actually it wouldn't be Jared Kushner. And about this Wyckoff, no, not this Wyckoff, who is a very close friend of Trump and Trump's son-in-law. No, that's just like him, isn't it? Putting family or friends in, that's not right. The Europeans consider the deadline too short to reach the commitments that Trump is now demanding. And basically a breakup could happen. Just yesterday, according to this leak, Macron was talking about a possible betrayal by the United States toward Ukraine, and they were talking about distrust toward Trump's positions regarding Russia. And now, well, this clash is already happening with NATO, he says. He says in the new national security strategy that the United States can no longer uphold the world order like Atlas. Basically, it's like saying we can't protect you anymore. That's what you see there. That's kind of the message coming from the United States in some way. A very important topic, quite striking in these recent times. Also, well, drones apparently attacked this as well. This area is a gas terminal and an oil refinery. Reports say a Chechen government building was also attacked in nighttime strikes in Russia. One topic that caught attention is that attack. This attack targeted a building that at that time they say was empty because of the schedule, I imagine. But the thing is, well, it targeted one of these buildings that are emblematic of Chechnya, right? That also caught attention today because it's this one. Let's see if we can take a look at it. It happened at night, but this photo was taken during the day. If you've seen some movies, it's not a no. This building has appeared. Let's see if we can zoom out a bit. This building is quite well known. Reports say today is day 1381 of the Russia-Ukraine war. Ukraine reportedly launched attacks on this refinery, on an oil refinery, and also on a gas terminal. Also, they reportedly targeted this building, a building that is said to be related to intelligence matters. Well, it's the pride of Kadyrov. By the way, this building, right? So, well, it has been attacked, obviously, and it draws attention to the image of this damage to these windows. You can see there, well, a drone strike that they threw at this place. Supposedly, there were no injuries according to their reports because the building was empty at that time. Supposedly not. Well, that's part of what's happening in that conflict. By the way, the port of Tamyuk would be an operational base for Krasnodar. He reported that there was also a drone attack that damaged elements of the port infrastructure, and this also started a fire, according to the reports over there in Russia. No, that's also another attack that would have happened in Russia. Well, there have been several moves in that sense from Ukraine, bringing the war closer and closer to Russia, closer to Moscow, right? That also draws attention today. Meanwhile, there is a reaction from Macron regarding the comment that was revealed yesterday, a comment that obviously drew attention to Macron in a leak. He supposedly said that there wasn't much trust with the United States, basically, but Macron assures in official statements that there is no distrust, he says. There is no distrust between Europe and the United States regarding Ukraine. That's what the comment is about. There is no distrust in this situation. That's what makes it, well, an obviously expected reaction. No, it wasn't going to stay on that topic, and, well, obviously it draws attention. Another topic that has also been surprising is this one. Well, the deal that Netflix has made with home box office, and apparently I also understand with Warner Bros., right? It's basically the whole set of businesses, they say, in this union that has been made between these mega companies. No, well, it includes Home Box Office Max, Home Box Office, and Warner Brothers for $82.7 billion. That would be the cost of all this. So, well, what's gonna happen? Is Netflix going to absorb all the projects, all the movies they had and put them on its platform? Or are we going to keep paying for each platform separately? Or how is it going to be? How is this going to work? What do you think is going to happen? Well, who really knows? But it will be interesting, obviously, because this move doesn't... No, well, it's not very hard to see exponential growth in these kinds of platforms that have grown a lot. Unless they purchase from each other, they just keep trading these catalogs. Ultimately, the catalog of projects and movies is what's most valuable, right? So, well, the acquisition is interesting. Obviously, it's been one of the most eye-catching news stories today when it comes to business topics. All of this comes from the move that was made. By the way, last night we were following this movement again, which involves a drone. It's a drone, an MQ-4C Triton, which belongs to the United States Navy, and they launched this drone from Florida. From that point in Florida, it practically goes all the way to the Mexican coast near Merida. Yes, that's how far this drone goes, and then it returns. This is the fourth consecutive night that an MQ-4C high-altitude surveillance drone has been present. It was reportedly launched by the United States Navy from the Semeru Naval Station in Jacksonville, Florida, and is heading southwest, conducting a kind of nighttime patrol off the east coast of Mexico, according to reports. There's also some curious movement happening in that regard, which is an important topic as well. So let's move on to other matters, other interesting points. How is the World Cup draw turning out? What happened with this draw? They gave a prize to Donald Trump, a Federación Internacional de Fútbol Association award, a peace prize, but given by Federación Internacional de Fútbol Association, I think on purpose, to Trump. The point is that Mexico, so far there's still someone missing, but in Mexico's group there's Mexico, South Africa, South Korea, and there's still someone else missing. There should be four. It's Group A, Mexico. Mexico is Mexico, South Africa, South Korea. Group B is Canada, Qatar, Switzerland. Group C is Brazil, Morocco, Scotland. Group D is the United States, Paraguay, Australia, and Germany. Costa Rica and Ecuador are the others. And Group F has the Netherlands, Japan, and Tunisia. One more is missing. We'll have to wait a little longer, but the decisions are already being made. Donald Trump, well, receives this award. The award, he says, is one of the greatest honors of my life, Trump said when receiving it. He said he didn't care about awards or recognition. That's what he claims. He simply cares about saving lives, Trump says in that message. And well, Shaquille O'Neal was there, that man was there. What's the name of this American football player? I forgot his name too, he's pretty well known, but anyway. There were a lot of people there obviously showing how these groups are going to look. The absence there was from the Mexican president, who apparently, for some reason, didn't show up, didn't arrive. There's the empty seat, there's the Canadian Prime Minister, President Trump, and the Mexican president is missing. Where did they go? Well, who knows where they went? The seat was left empty and, well, honestly, they just didn't show up. Nobody knows. So far, I haven't seen any reports saying anything at this point in the live broadcast. Obviously, this is live, so this will probably change. It's interesting, since this meeting was highly anticipated and there was supposed to be a prior one with the president. I'm not sure which was more important. That's the issue. It's still very weak and we'll be waiting to see if a few more details come out. Alright? Well, it's a lottery, and in any case, it's very political, definitely a very political lottery when talking about peace. And at the same time, there's a strong criticism of all the moves being made right now by the United States, especially with Venezuela. It's important to confirm if there will be an operation and what will happen. Another topic that's interesting and another important issue as well is this image that has been published. This was published today about Comet 3C. It's a spectacular image by Michael Jagger, an image that also shows different versions of how the comet's brightness appears at different moments. In this case of the very famous 3-eye atlas, they keep showing some spectacular images, some with a tail, some moments without a tail as well. So that's another interesting topic. Another thing that also draws attention is what's happening with these sunspots that are being observed right now. In this solar maximum that we're experiencing, there are 4 sunspots, they say colossal and highly magnetic. They have appeared, forming one of the most active and strongest regions of this cycle that we're experiencing. Apparently, this is one of the most active and strongest solar maximums ever. Also, in recent history, at least in recent history, in the last 12 years, that level hadn't been seen. It's not really like that, even in the last 100 years, but it does stand out today. And well, another interesting topic is this image, an image that happened in the ocean. A person was in the ocean, out in open sea. And when he looked up at the sky, he realized there were a lot of objects flying from one side to the other. He said, obviously, I need to record this. I was there counting the objects, about 35 objects, that's what I managed to count. Pausing and watching, we probably can't see them all. They're moving too fast from side to side. Who knows what they are? Well, now that's really something, you know. It makes you say, well, what the heck is going on? There are simply too many objects captured here, I insist. Open sea activity, well, quite abundant. But look, if you have a starry night like this, right, well, you'll almost certainly see fewer strange things, right? Aside from satellites, which are very clear, and besides you have apps to check what types of satellites they are. But regardless, there's a lot of activity in the sky. Clear skies show that there's more activity than people usually think. There is, right? That's also interesting. Another thing that also draws attention right now is, let's say, this. The Venezuelan situation continues to cause problems, with 4 international airlines joining the wave of flight suspensions in Venezuela. Now we're talking about Wingo, Satena, the Panamanian Copa Airlines, and Boliviana de Aviación. These companies have already released their statements. Did I say there's no closed airspace? Well, yes and no. Not exactly, obviously. Venezuela says that there isn't officially a closed airspace on their government's part, but from the FAA and the actions taken by them by the United States. Well, there is an airspace, or there's risks involved in flying there right now. So even if there isn't an official airspace closure from the Venezuelan government, there is a closure, right? It's tacit, right? So no movements are allowed. Or because of risk. And that risk, whether real or not, is enforced by the companies, right? There are fewer companies each time. And when we look at how FlyRadar is doing there, you say, well, if you don't see any movement, right? I mean, you don't see any significant movement, even less. Well, if you want, we can get into it right now. And where do you see movement in Caracas? Well, in the northern part is where you can see a little bit of movement. But if you look, let's see if we can... Basically, they just go around, right? The planes, I mean, you see movement from time to time. Small planes do pass through here. Private planes might circle around, but not big planes. And right now, well, take a look. I mean, there's clearly a gap around there, but if you get closer, you'll be able to see small planes look over there. We're looking, for example, this is a plane. And if we see a plane, it's one of those small private planes, right? And you keep watching. There's also a Venezuelan company there, which does fly, right? It flies to Colombia. That's another small plane. We're seeing it right there. And so if you go, you'll find planes. I mean, there are planes flying. I've been mentioning that ever since all this mess started. This one is a big plane. Let's see which company it is. Yes, it's a big plane. It says it's Caracas. La Vigía wouldn't be the flight it's gonna have. And it's a McDonnell Douglas 82. That's the name it has. And, well, it must be, I suppose, a company from over there. I can't imagine. There's still not much movement in this area yet. Where to? Towards the capital, towards Caracas. No, that's where there are still this kind of flights. Look, here's another plane. But it even says it's not giving any information. We don't know what kind of plane this is. Curious thing, but, well, there's little movement. You see few movements, few planes flying, especially big planes. Well, it's rare to see them flying at this moment. Other airlines, well, like I said, are joining the shutdown, let's say, right? There's a new theory that came out about what happened with these. Do you remember when 6,000 planes were grounded, possibly due to a strong solar storm? Well, it turns out there's a different theory, and it's not about a solar storm, but about a cosmic ray. What would have happened is a cosmic ray, according to this new theory. A theory that, well, also has some basis, right? I mean, there's something to back up this conclusion. Let's get into the details of what is known, not the theory by Clive Dyer. A theory in which several experts claim that the sun was not directly responsible for the plane's crash. JetBlue East was flying between Cancun and I believe New Jersey, so Cancun and the United States, right? That was the plane that had the malfunction and experienced a very abrupt, severe descent. It was an Airbus. Initially, they blamed the intense solar radiation storm for interfering with the flight systems. But the flight and space specialist, Clive Dyer, reportedly said that it wasn't necessarily that. He claims that at that exact time and along the flight path, there wasn't high solar radiation. I mean, there was very strong solar activity during those hours and days, but not at that time. So he says this, and that opens up another topic for us, doesn't it? He claims and suggests this was a cosmic ray. It's a particle, he says, of high energy coming from deep space from some supernova. For example, he says, and this would have been the cause of these rays. They are invisible rays, but simply when they arrive, well, they can disrupt electronic circuits. Even with a simple bit flip from 0 to 1 or vice versa, they cause serious failures in the systems. That's why the cosmic ray theory is now considered the most credible so far. And, on the other hand, the most concerning. Because it doesn't just depend on the solar climate, but also, well, it depends on cosmic rays. With the solar climate, at least you know it, you can kind of predict it. And if you know there was a solar storm, so the geomagnetic storm, which is the one that reaches Earth, well, it's going to arrive at a certain time, on a certain day more or less, right? But how do you calculate it? When cosmic rays come? He says it's basically impossible, at least for now, for us to predict cosmic rays, he says. The rays are invisible, constant, and can change electronic circuits. The cosmic ray theory is now viewed as the most credible and concerning. Since it's almost impossible, he says, he doesn't say if it's almost impossible, he says, to predict or avoid without redesigning aircraft electronics. This explains why these planes, these 6,000 planes, were grounded in order to update the software and avoid this problem. So, well, that's at least the theory. A new theory that is also important to try to understand right now as well. Well, another topic that I don't know if you've noticed, those who are getting ready to buy a computer, who buy the parts and assemble them and all that, or who want to upgrade and add more to them, RAM. Have you noticed? RAM has skyrocketed. RAM prices have skyrocketed. I don't know if you've noticed, but right now they're saying that RAM has become so expensive that, for example, Samsung, which makes its own RAM, they stopped selling it to Samsung because it's so expensive. They'd rather sell it elsewhere and profit. So it's a curious topic, isn't it? Why? Because of artificial intelligence. Right now, the artificial intelligence companies are. They're buying and buying RAM. They need RAM, and because of this, there's a shortage of RAM. That's why the price has skyrocketed so much. Even small basic RAMs now cost 15, 16 or 20,000 pesos. It's outrageous. That's where we are. We've been checking, we've been looking at the prices. RAM kits for consumer PCs have skyrocketed. This is due to the huge price, the massive purchases that artificial intelligence companies are making. We're experiencing a kind of bubble where companies are buying all of this excessively. According to reports, even Samsung, which makes its own RAM, manufacturers of Galaxy phones, tablets, laptops, watches and so on, well, they've been selling RAM to other companies because of the high price. They don't even supply themselves, considering their current business size, right? He says the global market includes both Samsung's subsidiaries and its competitors. Samsung, Dell and Lenovo laptops sold at Best Buy or any company may be affected. They might have memory chips made by Samsung in their RAM slots, which means Samsung's families or subsidiaries have been doing or selling quite well. Right now, they're basically making a killing with this price increase, selling them at a cost they hadn't considered before. Because of the high demand and the idea as well, it's causing a disruption in that area, isn't it? So that's how it is. Pay attention to the prices, how they're going to be when it comes to computers and electronic devices, not just computers, but those as well. So that's what they managed to get. Let's move on to other very interesting topics as well. And there really is, well, more information from there. There's a case that I had pending to talk about where a person's vision was restored or returned. This is a theological breakthrough. Well, they say unprecedented. Science would be breaking the limits. And the thing is, well, Israel achieves the world's first 3D cornea implant. A 70-year-old woman regained part of her vision after receiving a biological cornea that was 3D printed. It's a surgery considered historic performed by Rambam Haifa Hospital in Israel. It's the first time that a cornea created entirely in a laboratory with human cells has been successfully implanted in a human being. The technology was developed by the Israeli company Price Bio, which could revolutionize the treatment of blindness. Cornea for more than 13 million people who are waiting for a cornea right now. With this, you would no longer need a cornea transplant from another person, but they could create that cornea through this machine. And then they could install it for you. Basically, it's not a solution. He says it would be safe and it would also be more affordable and easier to achieve. Obviously, well, there it is, right? Isn't it true? It's one of those advances, those breakthroughs that you hardly ever see in the media. But it shows, the new reality we're seeing, about advances and more advances and impressive breakthroughs, right? Also, interesting. How have you all been? Greetings, Luisa. How have you been? A very good greeting to Pedro, to Luis, also to Carlos Martinez, to Mr. Draper. How have you been? Greetings also to Marcela. How are you? How have you been? A big greeting to Damagico, Luna Pedro. Very good to Beatriz Alvarez. How are you, Lopo? What's up? How have you been? Well, to everyone, to the whole community, very good. And Farah says, how are you, Farah? Greetings, very good greetings. What's up? A shout out to the whole community that's watching us. A shout out as well. By the way, to the community watching us on replay, I know many of you watch us. Later we'll move on to other important topics. Given the forecast, it's happening right now in the United States, in Europe, and also in Asia, this forecast. It notes that vortices will reach various points in both the northern and southern United States. This Arctic wave could be arriving, and they are issuing several important warnings beyond the forecast. Here we comment day by day. At night, we talk about what is expected for the coming days. This upcoming weekend is going to be very intense, as several warnings have been issued. I think it's important for those who are in really extreme conditions to take this into account, right? And still, well, this is interesting. First of all, remember that the cold has already caused several deaths in this situation. At this early stage, let's say winter hasn't even started yet, but the storms are already here, right? The cold wave hitting the Midwest and Northwest of the United States is bringing wind chills as low as minus 25 degrees Celsius. Health and emergency alerts are in effect in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois, and other states will be added this weekend. Authorities and medical centers have responded with special protocols to prevent frostbite and hypothermia. This unusual weather phenomenon is more common in January, not December, sometimes even in February. The National Weather Service, the CDCs, have already issued a warning that the cold is even affecting people's judgment. And I find that interesting because sometimes you wonder, why did they do that when they could have saved themselves? And I don't know what. And I remember a case of a person in Mexico City who died of hypothermia. And I realized it was around this time last year or the year before. I don't know if you remember. It was a young guy and he ended up in one of those uneven areas. But the car broke down, water got inside. Yes, and he died of hypothermia. And I wondered, how is it possible for someone to die of hypothermia? You couldn't just get out and climb onto the roof? I don't get it. There had to be a way to survive. Why did he stay and freeze to death? And then when you see the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report, which says that when it's really cold, people's judgment starts to fail. You start making bad decisions. So they say, be aware that you might be making a judgment mistake helps you avoid future errors. If you remember this, then when the time comes, wait, what am I saying? What am I saying? I don't have to do this. I have to do this. And try to be like yourself. Make an effort to return to a normal judgment and free yourself from a risk, from danger, even from dying, right? So then what we're seeing right now was this in Mexico City. I mean, they didn't have extremely cold temperatures, but on that occasion, the problem was that hail had fallen. In fact, it's not even that I don't remember which month it was. Let's see if you remember which month it was, or maybe someone here from the community remembers because we talked about it. The case seemed odd to us. We wondered how someone could die of hypothermia in Mexico City when it wasn't even cold, just some hail, he says. Because of watching the video, the consciousness part, right? Another topic is the wind issue. You've already seen it, right? One thing is the temperature. And another thing is that when the wind blows, you feel much colder, but much better. Often you can be in a cold temperature without it being extremely freezing. But just the wind alone can give you hypothermia. So that's why the idea of protecting yourself from the wind is very important, right? You should keep that in mind, right? What does it say? Besides the difficulty that comes with movement and the cold, people who are vulnerable can be even more affected. Temporary shelters are being set up, information campaigns are underway, and transportation is reinforced for vulnerable groups like the elderly, children, and the homeless. The government of those states recommends wearing layered clothing, not too tight, but rather looser, clothing and several layers, to avoid prolonged cold wind exposure. Also, check the condition of homes and vehicles to reduce risks during this polar wave. The United States is facing very harsh cold, but also in Europe, in some parts of Europe and Asia, the early Arctic wave is revealing an unusual pattern that, as they say, is putting people at risk. But it also tests the response capabilities of public health systems, he says. Hypothermia, he says, can set in before a person is fully aware of their own vulnerability. And suddenly, it can be a little too late because you're already experiencing hypothermia, right? So, well, please keep that in mind. If you're watching this video, please share it as well. If you help us with that, that would be great. And let's move on to other important topics. The beginning of this moment is already happening, let's say, a moment that's been highly anticipated by astronomy enthusiasts, right? This moment, when multiple falls of these small meteorites are observed, started yesterday, or rather, it was activated. Yes, although the best part will be from the 13th to the 14th, the 13th and 14th, basically as the days go by, it will keep increasing, it will keep rising. The activity of these Geminid meteors, Geminids, that's what they're called. So, well, also, if you have the chance, at night you can go out and observe this phenomenon, these phenomena, right? Surely, among other things, the Geminid meteors are active between December 4th and 20th, although the 14th and 15th are when you can see them the most. It's estimated that between 40 and 50 meteors will be passing by each hour. That's more or less what they calculate at the peak of their activity. So, well, that's the topic. In case you also want to have this experience of watching the meteors, the real problem is sleep, right? Sometimes you really have to be well rested to stay there all night. Watching comets, right? Anyway, that's how it is. Let's discuss another important topic. Here's another image. Earlier, we shared a really good image of what's happening. Well, over there in South Asia, right? In this whole area. And check out how Sumatra looks now. No, you can't really see it there, right? A while ago, we share all the material that has been coming out of this Semeru volcano. This time, though, it's not the Semeru volcano itself, it's just the rivers. No, listen, this... There it is, that's the point. Look at the huge amount of rocks it leaves behind. And when? When did Alex arrive? I think it was in rivers that I knew, like around Matacanes and that whole area towards the south of Nuevo Leon. Those who know will know what I mean. It was a different river. I mean, after Alex, it was a different river because you go to the same place and you kind of already know where everything is, right? But it was different. Things changed because suddenly rocks that fall shaped the river in a different way. I think Alex had the biggest impact, but it's fine now, since it changed the river's courses in some areas. I mean, that's how huge the whole thing was. No, I think it's so strange to see such a huge, massive phenomenon. But no, I don't feel like it's been talked about over here on this side. Not the same distance, maybe not with Asia and all that, but what really draws attention are... I mean, 883 people have died so far, 520 are still missing to this day. So it's a very harsh phenomenon. And it's just one more in Sumatra, in Indonesia, at Malaysia, at Vietnam, at other regions where they've had this problem. No, what really catches my attention, a separate time, right? But check this out, look, check this out. This guy, the disaster, everything you can imagine. But look at the style never goes away. Yeah, that little car, his glasses, and look, on top of a rock, looking at the horizon. No, well, there are people who have style, even in the most difficult moments, right? But anyway, let's go to the comments. How have you been? How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. It's 1:21 in the afternoon here in Mexico. Now Mexico City, right? It doesn't say. Mister, how have you been? Hello, Mr. X. Hi, Marcella. How are you? Says Marisol. Honestly, someone has to stop Putin because he's destabilizing the whole world. I already know what he wants. Greetings, Marisol. How have you been? Very good. Don Draper, Carlos Martinez, Luis Alberto Castro. How have you been? Who else is with us today? Pedro. How have you been? A big greeting also to Quinta Magico Luna, to all the channel members. Thank you very much, by the way, for supporting us, for being members. And well, it looks like the year is going to end with an escalation between Europe, the United States, and Russia. It's not the escalation we expected to see like we thought 2026 would end. Well, it seemed like there would be a very big, very open conflict with Israel, but the situation with Israel has decreased to a great extent. Though it hasn't ended, the intensity has dropped significantly. But the situation between Ukraine and Russia, which seemed like maybe it could calm down, clearly isn't happening. It's nowhere near calming down, let's say. But that's another story. 2026 is also coming. A year of soccer. A year with other kinds of things, right? A year that's already wild, extremely wild in terms of technology. Very, very intense. I mean, those who are really paying attention to these things know what I mean, because it's intense on one hand. There's already a clash happening between them, between their empires, so to speak. There's a drop coming, a fall. I don't know if you've seen it. A fall from there because they showed the advances of Gemini and left Oppenheim far behind. So among the advances from other companies that have come out, many of them actually come from Oppenheim, from internal people who didn't like what they were seeing with Oppenheim, so they left and started their own companies with totally different approaches. So it's basically a war, a technological war. Not very interesting, but in the end, the ones who are affected or benefited are us, the users of the technology, generally benefited by the advances, but also affected by the risks. That also doesn't turn out well. He says that I'm hanging out with these Pedro. Very good, he says. We will start in 2000. Yes, exactly. We are going to start in 2026. Very intense and different, honestly, just as I expected. Fernando, how have you been? Thanks for the comment and greetings to everyone watching. We really appreciate those who've supported us from the start. If not, then check it out from the beginning. We're here with pleasure and we'll be back later with more information. Thank you for joining us for a little while tonight. Also here live, Astrid and I chatting, and if there's something urgent, well, we go live at any time, right? Greetings. Have a great weekend. We'll talk later. See you soon.
Thank you for watching the PP News Live, where the events of planet Earth and the mysteries of space are analyzed like nowhere else. Thank you for subscribing.